Kay and Greenhill also talk about what it means to truly assess 21st century skills. First thing they discuss is supporting a balance of assessments, and this is something I saw in the research over and over again. So that means that we should not be overly reliant on one summative assessment or a few summative assessments given throughout the year, that we need to have a balance of mostly formative assessments throughout the everyday practice and also some summative assessments to help with that data. It's not going to do us any good to know at the end of the year or the end of a course that a child has not mastered certain standards. That will also allow us to provide useful feedback, and that's part of everyday learning. So assessing for 21st century skills means to keep that communication open and keep that feedback coming so that if there is an issue with a standard or mastering a certain skill, then students have the use or have the ability to remediate those weaknesses or to further enrich their strengths. We also need to provide a balance of technology-enhanced assessments, both formative and summative. We need to facilitate the development of portfolios of student work that will demonstrate mastery of the 21st century skills. Kay and Greenhill mentioned at this point that those portfolios should be used both in school and out of school. We also need to facilitate a balanced portfolio of measures to assess the education system's effectiveness at reaching high levels of student competencies in 21st century skills. So how are we going to assess that schools are actually teaching students 21st century skills and that there is success there? So with that in mind, we come back to a quote by Jerome Bruner that we read in the Kay and Greenhill text, which is knowing is a process, not a product. So thinking about the 21st century skills, thinking about how to assess those 21st century skills and contrasting those things with traditional grading, we're treating knowing as a product, as a final summation at the end of a course, or these individual grades that you leave behind and then they're eventually averaged. But that doesn't show us what the process was. That doesn't show us what students actually know. So how do we evaluate the process of knowledge? We're going to need a more accurate method of evaluation that holds students accountable for their progress. So it's not only, hey, Johnny, you have a D because you haven't turned in any assignments or you were late or you didn't do this specific project. What we need to know is how students are progressing with their skills and then hold students accountable for that progress. And so the conversation would then change to, Johnny, you have not at this point mastered writing a thesis in a persuasive text. So that is what we would be working on with him. We need to create a reflective environment. So from that point, the student will know, will be able to self-evaluate and self-reflect to figure out what is it that they're having trouble with as far as mastery and what can they do to help themselves as learners to master specific standards. Grades should reflect how much of the content was mastered. So if you get a 70%, then that means that you have mastered 70% of that content. So that takes away those non-achievement grades that we were talking about earlier. That will take the guesswork out of grading. So when you get a 70 in one class, you know that it's a 70 in the next class, the next class, and the next class. And even from assignment to assignment, teachers can change on this assignment, on this persuasive essay, a 70 means one thing, on the next persuasive essay, a 70 means another. So we're going to take the guesswork out for teachers, for students, and for their parents and administrators. That allows teachers to be proactive in both remediation and enrichment. So then you know where to focus your time. The time is precious, and as the stakes get higher and higher for our kids, the time becomes more precious. And so this really allows you to hone in and focus on what kids need or what kids need beyond what the actual standard is already. This is also more applicable to life outside of school. So when you go into a job, you don't get a number grade. Like as teachers, it wouldn't be like, oh, it's kind of a rough year for you, Abby. You know, you only got a 60% on the whole teaching thing. And I wouldn't really know what that means. Like 60% of what? Like I was here 60% of the time, or I was here 90% of the time, but this percent of the time, you know, I was texting and not teaching, or this percent of the time I was sitting behind my desk, or what does that mean? So that's not how we do it. We do it through evaluation systems, and you have certain standards that you're trying to hold up. And either you master those standards, you do your job, or you don't. There's not kind of a random grade or number thrown at this. So this is going to give kids more of a taste of what life outside of school is like, which goes way back, talking about standards-based grading, goes way back even to John Dewey, of making these relevant experiences that can be transferred into other aspects of their lives. So we're going to have to change some mindsets. So for better or worse, we have standardized testing, high stakes testing. It's given many of us many sleepless nights, but it has forced us to change how we think about grading. Students are being assessed on standards at the end of the courses, and here in Texas, as most of you know, our kids have to have passed or met an expectation with these tests to earn a diploma. So it's very high stakes. So without evaluating the progress on the standards throughout the year and getting an idea of where kids are, then students, teachers, administrators, parents, we don't have a clear picture of what a student knows. We don't really know what they know. And we go through that every year with testing, of kind of throwing up our hands and hoping that the kids will perform and do their best. And we have a general idea of their strengths, but not to the specific standards and the specific masteries. So waiting for a high-stakes standardized test to realize that a standard wasn't mastered is completely unacceptable. Kids should not be surprised. Teachers should not be surprised when a kid walks into a test. It's not a matter of luck. You can actually decide, or you can actually observe when kids have mastered skills, but the grading system that we have now, I guess, kind of puts like a curtain over it. It's hard to tell, and we get so obsessed with those grades that we don't know what the kid can actually do. So Polio and Hochbein say, to ensure quality education for all students, grading reform must become pervasive throughout secondary education in America. I read in several articles that elementary schools and early middle schools do a much better job of this than high schools, but high schools are so slow to change because we are used to grades in this specific way, in this traditional way. And we have to have all stakeholders be willing to make this misstep, make this change, to ensure that high quality education, to ensure that curriculum and instruction is reaching every student in an equitable way. There are benefits for teachers as well. This is not just about benefits for students, but you will also see lots of benefits from this. So standards-based approaches should be a collaborative effort. So improvement in learning and an improvement in teaching. So you're going to have improved learning, you're going to have an improved experience for your kids, and that will improve your practice as a teacher. So Rick DeFore says that one of the most powerful high leverage strategies for improving student learning available to schools is the creation of frequent, high-quality, combative, formative assessment by teachers who are working collaboratively to help a group of students acquire agreed-on knowledge and skills. So the reason I kind of got into this thought process about standards-based assessment and grading is I went to the professional learning community, the Solution Tree conference last week, and they talk a lot about common formative assessments that are created by groups of teachers in the PLC. And that got me thinking a lot about standards-based grading, because that's essentially what we're asking kids to do. That's essentially what we're asking teachers to do. And so these two really can go hand in hand. And with common formative assessments, you're going to have efficiency for the teachers, so you'll know how to assess those skills in a more efficient way. You're not going to be creating things on your own every single day. You also will have equity for students across classrooms. And this is an effective strategy for determining whether the guaranteed curriculum is being taught and learned. So every child does deserve access to that curriculum. So common formative assessments will give us an idea if every child is getting an equitable experience from classroom to classroom. It also informs the practice of individual teachers. So we do use it for student growth, but we also use it for teacher growth. And it builds a team's capacity to improve its program. So when you see that one teacher has students that's struggling, who are struggling mightily in one standard, and you see that through the standards-based grading that you're going to be working with your common formative assessments, then a teacher who is maybe more successful in that can come and teach a new strategy, model lessons, do some creative intervention and class swapping and things of that nature. So it really is building a team's capacity to improve their own program and not relying on those high stakes kind of stick discipline type things from an administrator. And it also facilitates a systematic collective response to students who are experiencing difficulty. So in this way, a team can work together to intervene and respond to kids who need that intervention. And finally, it offers the most powerful tool for changing adult behavior and practice. So like we were talking about previously, when you see that you're having a lot of trouble, your kids are having a lot of trouble with this standard, you're going to see that through your common formative assessments. You're also going to see that through your grade book of your standards-based grading. Then you know that there is some sort of gap in your practice and you might need a new angle and a new approach for that standard. So working together, none of this can be accomplished with a wide variety of grading practices and interpretations. So inconsistency at this point is not our friend. I don't believe in the standardization of curriculum, as many of you know, but there should be an equitable practice between classroom to classroom. Standards-based grading and common formative assessments really are partners. They work hand in hand. They work so well together. But there are also other modes of assessment, of assessing standards, and those should be used as well. So individual assessments, teachers' individual assessments that they see their kids need at that point, districts benchmarks, summative assessments, and obviously your high-stakes testing, standardized testing at the end of the year. Those are all going to be modes of assessments that you can work with, and they can also work for standards-based assessment. In each form of assessment, a focus on the standards is key. So to make it work, Moffitt actually says that if you can avoid giving grades at all, you should, but that's not really where we are. That's not reality for us. So the next best thing is that he says that if you can't do that, then teachers should not be giving a grade to individual activities, but only the totality of a student's work. So for example, if you're giving them a grade on generating a persuasive essay, then you should only be focused on the final product of that persuasive essay. You shouldn't be focused on the little assignments that led you there. Then you can make a blanket judgment on the whole of a student's work from the marking period. And that's a lot easier to do when you look over it once and confer with the student about it. So when you're going through that reflective process and where you're walking together with your student through that, then the paperwork isn't such a nightmare, first of all. And second of all, you're not punishing students, I guess is the right way to say it, for the number of assignments they complete, but instead for the skills that they have learned. You can use systems that are already in place to implement standards-based grading. So many databases and learning management platforms and learning management systems do have the capability of doing a standards-based approach, and there's also a plethora of strategies of how to translate a standards-based approach and make it kind of fit in, if you must, to a traditional grading. So you might be doing standards-based throughout the 6 weeks, and you would also have a traditional grade based on those standards as students move along, so that they'll have a good idea of where they are. You need to keep an open dialogue with students and parents. So the key to this kind of whole thing is keeping those open lines of communication with all of the stakeholders. And that also means that training and support are crucial. So we need teachers and administrators to be trained and be prepared, and it has to be well planned. I don't think you can just kind of throw yourself into standards-based grading all willy-nilly. You have to have adequate training, and then you have to have administrative support and parental support. There are going to be situations for which you did not plan, and I read a lot about those in the research, that there's no way that you can come up with every little response to every little thing that might come up through standards-based grading, or really anything for schools. So you have to have a foundation that prepares you to respond when situations and challenges come up that you did not plan for. And very importantly, you must continue to work collaboratively throughout the process. So when you're working with a